You like contenders? We got contenders. 273, tactical crouch. We've got not one, not two. I guess two. That's actually not true. We have exactly.
Is there a surprise guest?
We are already
Who knows?
failing at
Who knows?
counting the guests. This is crazy.
We have two guests. Here with us today, we have Paulsible and Lafon from Contenders Korea and just Overwatch fame in general, esports fame. Doing all kinds of things. How are you guys doing?
Fame is generous, but
I'll take it.
The extra guest was my ego. Like I'm just that big of a
Honestly,
self-centered individual. So that was
Sure.
the other person.
I thought the extra guest was going to be Theo, your cat, showing up and messing with stuff in the background.
There's still time. There's still time. And you know what? There's a second cat that no one knows the name of.
Oh,
That's true.
It's got to be something coffee related. If I know Lafon, like it's got to be like
neither of the cats.
Oh, okay. It's not yours. Never mind. Never mind. Fair play. Fair play. Yiska, how are you doing today?
I mean, it has to. It's the German answer, you know? It has to.
I like that. I'm going to have to steal that. It has to. How's it going? Well, it has to. There's never been a colder and more bureaucratic response.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not reading Reddit threads that just like drag us.
No, you never. You reading Reddit? Absolutely not. Couldn't be you. Couldn't be you.
Yeah, no. What a read. It was my Joker moment. I'm going to be honest, Joe. Like that one, you had your fun. It's going to be like just a race to the bottom. Like it's not even that it's a game of telephone because that would involve two people. People look at the source material, and as their neurons degrade over the course of 5 minutes, the story completely gets ridiculous, right? Like apparently, George said Prophet is the laziest player in the Overwatch League. Tomorrow, Prophet is already the laziest player in esports history. Like it's going to be fun.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen on the internet. But
unfortunately,
very unfortunately. But we are here with our two special guests, exactly two special guests, perhaps a half one, depending on whose cat shows up, to talk about Contenders Korea and the recent Run It Back tournament. Kind of getting a landscape of what Korea is up to, talking about the graduating class, maybe diving into some storylines from or going into the upcoming Pacific Showdown. And we'll probably be doing this moving forward for the next couple of weeks. Going into each contender's region, bringing on some representatives, and getting their takes and kind of doing an interview, let's say, of what's going on in each region. So today is Korea. If you like Korean esports, if you like Korean Overwatch, like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, download the freaking podcast because apparently that helps. All that stuff, all that good jazz. But before we dive into this, we do have to give a special shout out to our Patreon producers and our YouTube members. You make the show possible and you support making all this content. So thank you so much to Avril Vista Bebe, Battlecrab, Refine Bean, Bronzebot Boohow, Picasso, Chris R34444, Kasha67, Lolshin, Porkchop Sammy, Rexane, Stuck in Bronze, and our YouTube members Ice M Jello, William Jess, Fishmam, Fire Element 6, AK, Chris R, Brother, Stuck in Bronze, Samuel Spaza, Adam L, and Sagi Fumi. Boys, I sound like Ludwig. Boys, what's up with Korea? Who's good? O2? I hear lots of good things.
Yeah. There we go.
So just a bit.
Cool.
All right, very
done.
good. All right, 273. Thank you guys for coming.
O2 good.
I mean, they dropped a map.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is the O2 Blast gap right now.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes when you have like regions of contenders, right? And there's like one team so far in ahead, it was like a weird meta or there's like a weird it's just O2 are that good, man. I am continually impressed with not just the players but the staff on that team, how they are just good and good and good. I think this is like, is it 6 out of the last 7 now? Or no, it's 5 out of the last 6. One of those two. Basically in the last like 2.5 years, O2 Blast have only lost the championship like once in Contenders Korea. That's ridiculous to me.
Yeah. And keep in mind, it's not like there is one coach, let's say some Rush type figure other than Boss, I guess, which I still think is not really a coach. It's more like a, spotter of talent if you want. But last year I heard like, oh, Smash hard carried that in terms of coaching, and then he went to the Gladiators. The O2 gap hasn't become smaller by such a coaching talent, departing. Do you think this is mostly because now they have name recognition, and specifically they have the connection to Shock, so all the best players would just want to play on O2?
I think it's there's a couple things. One, a winning team is going to attract winning players. It's the name of the game. And I think with O2 so far ahead, O2 kind of gets the pick of who they want to recruit. And the other thing too for O2 Blast is their recruitment process is long reaching. They've loaned out to my mind, I think 4 players between B-sides and Run It Back.
And that's just from their like technically signed to their main roster. They have an academy team, like an O2 academy, that they also loan people out from as well.
And with that being said, it's not like these players are poor. They're really, really good. I mean, you're thinking of players like Spectra, right? Some players like Proud, who I think in Proud's case, at least, one has an argument for being one of the best hit scans in all of Contender's career. Just, was like 16 years old. So he's very, very young. But yeah, so O2 Blast, that's the one part of it too. They're one of 2 academy teams left. And that plays, I think, a role, not as big a role relatively, because T1 is also in the region. But yeah, O2 is not afraid to, work with talent, and they have at least from the outside looking in, we obviously don't know the team structure specifically, but they seem to have an eye for the future. It's not just about developing talent for this season. It's about developing it for next season, having the pipeline down the road as well. So I think it's a well-managed team beyond just being a winning team.
Yeah,
that definitely seems like it.
I feel like that's almost smells a little bit of crusty, in the sense that, he always had those connections to those players, would, already establish the proper connections and stuff like that. And I also have to say, if you think about profitability in this space, if I had to guess which Overwatch organization is profitable from their business, probably O2 Blast, one of the more likely ones, given the buyouts. Yeah. And I'm not sure what if it's public what their prize money share is, or I'm not
sure.
Right, like, but in overall, that's I think at this point you would have to say the greatest talent forge of all time over something like Element Mystic, over something like KDP.
Yeah. And it's it's really impressive because O2 Blast just keep doing it, right? I really got to give a shout out to O2 Boss, I think is his name. I've never talked to the guy personally, but I've only ever heard good things about him. And he's been the guy with this team since they emerged in like 2018, right? He's been managing this, and between whatever resources he's able to grab and whatever the Shock is able to put in monetarily to this team, it's just far and away a better routine than any other Contenders team has ever been, right? Even other academy teams, like there have been like other great academy teams. Team CC was Shanghai Dragons Academy. There have been times, British Hurricane was amazing, right? But none of them managed to survive this long.
Definitely.
And O2 was successful even before Shock got involved as well. Like, they've only been the academy team of Shock since January, I think. January this year,
within
right?
the year, I feel like. Within recent memory.
Like, part of it, like, you can attribute, like, oh, well, the Shock's academy team, and they have all this money and they have all these resources. But also, it's just like straight up good management.
Yes.
Forever.
This is the utmost definition of like real recognizing real, right?
Yeah. I think to add to that point specifically, and not to make it the Contender's career the O2 show, which to a certain extent it is.
It was always going to be.
but even beyond that, I mean, it showcases itself in gameplay, right? Like, we talk about professionalism and it's just another day at the office for teams because they're so much better. And I say that about O2 Blast with the most sincerity. It's not like a pejorative in any sense. They're not bored when they go up there. They're entirely professional, right? And these are kids. They're like 16, 17, 18. Some of them barely turning 18. So
most of them barely turning 18.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Turning 18. And I think to have that kind of description for what are, young players speaks to the environment that they're put in. Never is the team walking up on stage as they have in the entirety of Run It Back and not look like they were going to work, right? And they went into the server, and no matter how bad the opponent across them was, they gave the perfect game every time, and it showcased in their standings. I mean, they dropped one map, and
Yeah.
it's you just don't do that without having and I should say not one map in the regular season. They dropped one map across the entirety of the tournament. You don't do that without, treating the game like it's your job, which it is.
The thing is, when I hear they only lost one map, I mean, there also has to be an opponent on the other side. In the past, like there were teams like T1. We know what T1 was capable of by proxy, or now seen last year with Philly Fusion. Certainly, like ridiculous talent in Zest and MN3. So that they didn't face pushovers last year. Did they? Is it considerably easier now if they manage to like stomp through and only lose one map?
I think you can make the argument that there were several other teams like going through restructures this season as well, and that, like, if we look at T1 specifically, right? They lost, in my opinion, kind of like T1's signature play. I mean, there's hardly been a time in the history of competitive Overwatch where Neist wasn't signed to T1 or Philly Fusion. And I don't know if he left or if they dropped him or what the situation with that was, but between like Summer Series and Run It Back, he went to Panthera now, right? And they didn't pick up another DPS player. They just shifted Cleston to DPS.
And that was definitely something I wanted to bring up. I'm like, Cleston was like a cool flex tank that I was like hyped to come into Overwatch 2 with. And now apparently per Liquipedia, he's playing DPS. So I was like, what's up with that?
I mean, almost suspect that it was like T1 just didn't. I really don't know, honestly. I really don't know. I'm trying to like. There's some things you can like guess and gander, like maybe they just couldn't find a DPS. There's a lot of other DPS players in the region,
right?
So it's a weird move, and it did not go that well. That being said, Cleston did like level up over the season. He was also on Reaper duty most of the time. But like his Tracer leveled up a little bit, but he was still getting kind of owned by like guys like HeeSang and TOPDRAGON.
Sure.
So yeah, we'll get to a couple other teams that I think have in terms of the structure of like how the region went and like what teams I think actually had a chance to give it to T1 even though they did it, or to O2 even though they didn't. But yeah, I get like the T1 for a second. The big thing about T1 is they made a gamble on the meta coming into
They did,
right?
yeah.
It was that they thought it was going to be because after the Overwatch League, where it was just entirely a mirror, there was no variation whatsoever. They went all in on the Winston, Sojourn composition. It turned out in Contenders Korea, actually in terms of most of the regions in Contenders, it wasn't a hard lock meta, right? There weren't like exclusively a mirror composition that was played all the time. There were sort of a rock, paper, scissors effect, right? We heard rumors before the grand finals or before the playoffs in the Overwatch League. There was some of that Roadhog coming in, especially from APAC. Yeah. It turned out that was the case, that there were teams scrimming it. And for Contenders Korea anyway, that ended up providing a little bit of a shift. And I don't think, I mean, it's true. T1 just were unable to flex with the region as they kind of evolved the meta. And they just didn't have the personnel to do so. No slight to any of the players on that team, but they just simply didn't have the flexibility to run, like a Tracer. Cleston is not a Tracer player. I mean, Reaper, sure, maybe, but when it comes to Tracer, the best we can describe Cleston as, and this is entirely not as an insult, is as a non-Tracer player, did okay.
Sure.
And I think flexibility was actually one of the reasons that O2 really won. Right? Because keep in mind, most of the Contenders rosters are tight, right? Like you will get 5, maybe 6 players on Contenders Korea rosters. O2 Blast have 9. So they have people where, if we want to run, the Sigma on this map, or if we want to run, whatever, right? O2 Blast can run it. They have the people to run it. They can flex to it. It's not going to be a problem for them. Nobody else really has that option. Nobody else even has a second tank player, right? Yeah. So you are just most teams just kind of ran whatever their tank was comfortable with, right? Like, if you're T1, you're running the Winston because Arpen's not going to flex to the Sigma or the Roadhog, right? Panthera just ran the Roadhog because Protect's not going to be able to run the Winston at any time, right?
How ironic.
And that's and that's what you find from most of the other contenders teams. Whereas O2, not only were they the best team on like the Winston comp, which is what they played most of the season, but when they like needed to flex, they were more than capable to.
So let me throw a meta question at you guys, because I'm definitely hearing a name, or I'm not hearing a name that I feel like has definitely been featured within some of the NA and EU games that I've watched recently. I'm hearing you talk about Sigma. I'm hearing you talk about Roadhog. I'm talking about Winston. Was there any Orisa as like a?
There was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the way it worked out, ended up working out in Korea is, as I said, it was sort of a rock paper scissors meta, right? One kind of worked against the other, kind of worked against the other. So we saw, so Winston was like sort of the driving factor, kind of set the tempo, which makes sense. It's a rush composition, and we kind of played around that. So then the Roadhog came in as sort of it ended up. I know it wasn't developed this way, based on historical evidence, but it ended up being sort of a way to slow down the Winston composition, right? The Roadhog would play a pick, you play for map control, you try and get that isolation and go on from there. That ended up having two sort of pseudo answers to it. One was a Sigma composition, right? You play the shield mostly to block the hook and then kind of go from there. And the other was the Orisa, which just kind of has a lot of presence on the field, right? Between the Javelin interrupting take a breather, and the Javelin spin blocking hook, and obviously fortify, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, there were, I think, in as much as it just ended up being that Orisa was picked as a response rather than as an individual sort of setup on her own.
Interesting. And you're saying that, okay, so kind of branching from that, were there any teams that felt like, I think one of you mentioned that like there was a team that was like focusing kind of around Sigma. Is that fair to say? Were there kind of like those identities established this season?
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what most teams were, right? Most teams picked one, maybe a second identity, and just ran it. You know,
I'd actually, to interrupt that point, because I'd like to like point out, branch off from that point and bring up a team that I think deserves bringing up because they came in second overall. Is that the one team that was kind of, I don't want to say lacked identity, because they very much had identity, but were, I think, more willing to play around their flexibility than any other team in the region. Even O2 Blast, like O2 Blast, sort of set the marker. But I think Simprissa Gaming, who were our second place team in Contenders Korea, their identity stemmed from the fact that they could throw something at you and you didn't know what it was going to be. That's not to say they played they played crazy all the time, but they definitely had cheese picks. And I mean that in the historical context of that term, like pocket picks.
Sure.
And not even necessarily just cheese picks. Like Simprissa Gaming, just in my opinion, had the most flexible tank. 2U was the only tank really that we saw play everything this season. And it made it so that Simprissa Gaming, most other teams like would focus on just the Winston or just the Roadhog or whatever, right? So Simprissa were able to play that rock, paper, scissors game where nobody else outside of O2 Blast obviously really could. So that's, in my opinion, one of the reasons they were so successful was because 2U and TOPDRAGON were so flexible compared to everybody else in the region.
To put in perspective for 2U for a second, 2U played Winston, Roadhog, Sigma. I mean, the Winston probably the biggest outlier considering his historical hero pool. Obviously, primarily
being a flex tank.
In the Overwatch 1 parlance, the off tank player. But then added also this season a Junker Queen that ended up working and looked pretty good. Again, that was like that pocket pick thing I was talking about, a strategy, just one that sort of a one-off, but it worked so well, it put teams on notice. Like, you have to pay attention to what we're kind of doing. So that's, I mean, it was like 4 tanks that were played with success from 2U, which dwarfed anyone else. I think the best that came up second was like 2, which is, 2U comes out with so many picks and looks good on all of them. It was just a big difference maker for Simprissa.
Sure.
What does playing all heroes mean? Does that mean at a level, is 2U in the, okay, let me frame it this way. Is 2U this year's someone?
Interesting framing.
I'll say yes. I'll say yes.
Yeah, I would push maybe yes on that one, honestly.
I'm gonna say the ceiling is probably not as high as someone.
Sure.
Because someone has showcased it on like very different and at the Overwatch League level, right? Which also puts a little bit more credence to what someone can do.
Yeah.
But I think 2U coming into contenders, and I'm talking about like the A sides, B sides of our first tournament of the season, came in B sides, was a frankly as close to a one trick in that meta as you could get to, and Prisa fell off a cliff heading into playoffs because they just couldn't flex. They could not do it.
I don't put that on him though. They had really like young DPS players there. That was before they picked up TopDragon.
Right.
And it looked to me from the outside looking in, it looked like they still wanted to play like the Junker Queen meta once it got nerfed into the ground. Just because like their DPS weren't able to flex to anything else.
Okay.
Right. But I mean, even then, they tried to showcase like 2U tried to, would switch off of the Junker Queen and then went to things that were not meta at the time.
Yeah.
Even though there was a tank that was clearly, good. But has expanded the hero pool coming into the Run It Back tournament. I think has showcased at Contenders Korea, I think arguably the most flexibility of a tank player that I've seen in the tier 2 level right now, and has done it on all those heroes at a level high enough that I would not be. I would expect to see, at least some performance at the Overwatch League level. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think like maybe even sticking with Sin Prisa for a moment. I think this DPS duo, from anything from the community's perspective, especially like our own like weird Discord community, which if you're not already in there, join, sign up with the white name. There's links out there. Find it. Come join us. I want to start watching more VODs in public, and I want to watch the show match this Friday. So tune in if you're interested. I know TopDragon for reasons that we won't get into. Inside joke if you're in the know. Shout out Betty White. But Ade is definitely somebody that some people from our community have brought up quite a bit as somebody to kind of keep an eye on. Talk to me a little bit about this DPS duo. Is this like one of the top ones coming out?
I mean, yeah, I would have to say yeah, right?
Okay.
Briefly touching on TopDragon, just because it's really satisfying to like see TopDragon succeed, because when Lafon and I first casted this guy, it was on like First Fabulous Fighter in China, which was just a funny roster because it was just like TopDragon really trying and flexing it like every single time to hard carry the team, and now he's like actually on a successful roster. But the cool thing about like Ade is that he's somewhat just come out of nowhere this season, right? And while I wouldn't necessarily put him on the level of someone like Proud or Probe when it comes to the Sojourn, he can comfortably go toe to toe with those guys and not get absolutely bodied, right?
Okay.
I'm a little bit curious what his flexibility might be, because since we've had contenders in Overwatch 2,
sure.
It's just been Sojourn jail for any hit scan player, right? So I don't know what his hero pool is like. It could be, Sojourn gets nerfed into the ground, and then an Overwatch League team picks him up, and damn, he can't play anything but Sojourn, right?
Yeah.
But at least on the Sojourn, he's looked really good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think TopDragon is a selling point in this duo, right? TopDragon is is the flashier player, is the player that is, I think, showed up in bigger moments. But a lot of that also comes down to like the way the team dynamic worked, so it's tough to like pin that on Ade specifically, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Ade is a possible diamond that needs polishing, heading into kind of like further down the road. TopDragon though, I think probably the second best active player in Contenders Korea in that flex DPS role right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of qualifiers for that statement, but I mean, HeeSang is the one above him, and I think Spectre is in the conversation in terms of like players of that skill level, but Spectre wasn't on a team in Run It Back, so there's that element. But yeah, I think TopDragon comfortably performed, and was a big part of why Prisa came in second, and the way they came in second was also important because they kind of. That was a team that grew through the qualifier or through the the round robin stage. Yeah. So I would endorse TopDragon for sure, just from like the performances we saw, and then Ade again. Yeah, Sojourn jail is hard to kind of speak around because once you're off Sojourn, what do you do? And the other thing too is that when they needed to go to a Widow, they actually brought in a substitute in Veripick. So,
but they would sub out TopDragon though and keep Ade in. So
Interesting,
Ade would like play the because generally it's like Circuit Royale, right?
Yeah,
Where
circuit,
you're
like maybe a
putting-
Junker Town, I would guess. I don't know if that was necessarily in the map pool, but
We didn't see Junkertown at all, actually.
I
Okay.
actually don't think it was for this. In Summer Series, it was. I don't think
Gotcha.
it was for this one.
which makes sense on circuit though. Long sight
Yeah.
lines, see what the hits can.
And so yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily that Ade like can't play the Widowmaker. It's just they brought in Verapic to do that so that Ade would still be playing the Sojourn.
Okay. And then even looking at the remainder of this roster, Sanguinar is a name that obviously jumps out from
Sanguinar. I mean, I was actually really impressed with their backline too.
Okay.
Sanguinar, Lucio's a lot of the time, unless you like have the ability to like go back through and replays and watch just their POV, can be a little bit hard to pin down as to like they're doing really well unless you see like massive sound waves. But there were no times this season that I can remember where I was like, oh, Sanguinar just beefed it. And I can say that about almost every other Lucio at least once, right?
Yeah.
Just because, it's hard to play 100% on that role, I think.
Yeah, we've been in a couple of metas now. I think back to back where Lucio has been sort of just the
punching bag.
Here. Yeah, I'm here role right now. So
yeah. But Lee Soo-min really impressed me on Kiriko this season. I mean, Lafon, you were talking about how you think Lee Soo-min was the best Kiriko.
I think Lee Soo-min. I don't think Lee Soo-min's eligible for this season, if I remember correctly. I think he turns 18.
Turns 18 in July. Yeah.
You could sign him, but you'd be sitting on your hands.
Yeah, and I mean flex support is a pretty important role.
Yeah, you're gonna want somebody active. You don't. I don't know how many teams are gonna be in the market for another vigilante signing, but
yeah. I mean, Lee Soo-min, I think in terms of raw mechanics on Kiriko was at the very worst, like the second best player. Right. I think really performed on Kiriko. There were some, I think moments of like attention to like the mental game that kind of flew by, but it's a really demanding role, especially the way it was played, towards the end of the season. So it's kind of tough to kind of situate there. But I think this is a player that has a chance to like really showcase himself in that flex support role. The other thing though is, again, it's like, do you have a flexible hero pool?
Sure.
All the flex supports were on Kiriko duty the entire time, right? So
you want to talk about Sojourn jail?
Yeah.
Feel bad for all those Zen players out there because you're playing Ninja Girl.
It was really funny, like how diverse the compositions were this season, considering that like 3 out of 5 players on the team would always be playing the same thing, right? Like we still got a lot of like comp diversity, even though it was almost 100% time on Kiriko and Lucio and like 100% Sojourn time.
Yeah, I mean, good heroes, good to keep around. Anything else regarding Sin Prisa? I know that's maybe even talking a little bit about.
I mean, their coaching staff, right? Like that team does not get as good as they are from B-sides to run it back without a staff that kind of supports them.
Okay.
And I mean, clearly improve. Like it's one thing to see a team improve because they pick up good players. It's another one entirely to see a team with good players get better at places they're not good at prior. And I think it's rare to kind of see. It's tough to talk about coaching in general because it's a black box, right?
Yeah.
For everyone not in the team environment itself. But there is also an element that we saw a team perform a certain way in one tournament, and then saw them start the next tournament. Improved, but not quite at the level they finished the tournament with. So that consistent growth for Sin Prisa, I think, speaks volumes as to their staff behind them as well. And I mean to the players too, right? The players, executing on that strategy is something that you have to give a lot of credit to. So I think for Sin Prisa, this is a team and a roster in general that is most improved. I mean, I said this before. It's the most improved team, but like entirely in a non-pejorative way. Like it's not a joke or like, to put them down or anything. They improved as a roster to the second best team in Contenders Korea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, ending the regular season, with a map differential, kind of putting them in second, and then going. I haven't had a chance to necessarily catch the final, but I have to imagine that some of these maps were.
A couple of the maps were really close. And then O2, like you could
O2 does O2 things.
By the time we got to New Queen Street, like everybody knew the final was over.
Sure.
Yeah, Yeah.
Now, I mean, we bring up O2. I have to ask, HeeSang's been talked about in every conversation, much to the same degree that like Proper was coming into.
I mean, set expectations quickly. HeeSang is not Proper.
Okay, so that was definitely what I wanted to
I'd
establish early, where it's just like, I've heard this kid is like very good and is the truth, but like, is this the second coming of, God knows who?
Proper stepped into the Overwatch League and was immediately MVP caliber. There was not a single game where Proper looked out of place as MVP, right? I think you can hate the whole narrative around Proper MVP, whatever, but I think statistically, in terms of like the eye test, in terms of performance in game, Proper set the tempo for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think HeeSang is going to do that. I think HeeSang is going to be very, very good. I think he can challenge for Rookie of the Year pretty comfortably.
Okay.
But is he going to be like lights out day in, day out? I don't think that's fair to him. Especially the role he's on, right? He's not going to be on like a Sojourn, just taking over the server. So I think HeeSang is going to be very, very good. We're not looking at Proper 2.
Okay.
That was my favorite argument, where people got very pissy, like, what? Like, just give it to Proper now, and then next year the best rookie like HeeSang comes in, and then they win, and it's like, dude, you don't understand the argument. Because in order for HeeSang to win MVP, he would have to win it over Proper, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like, as it stands, and by the way, this still holds true. You're wrong, probably wrong, or have a crazy read on what's going to happen. Maybe you have a crystal ball, but by this point, still, and it's very early to talk about, but your favorite for next year's MVP should also be Proper. Even against the voting fatigue that he's going to be up against, right? Like, there's...
I watch so much sports. Please, voters, the voter fatigue thing, just... If he's the best player, he's the best player.
Yeah. I hope that especially people... I think I respect, like, if you realize this was probably going to be a sweep, that you then go elsewhere with your vote, whatever. I think you shouldn't be sure. I think you should be looking around, like... Let's say the same performance, he copies the same performance next year, that gets uncomfortably close just based on voter fatigue, right?
So I want to chime in there, because this, I think, ties kind of to things that have happened in the meta of the voting, and also some of the things that both Paul and Lafon, you both have kind of brought up about Contenders Korea specifically, is that there is more, it seems like there is an increased focal point of what can your tank do, that kind of dictating your style and your identity, and that could be a big driver of success. So for the three of you, is there, should we kind of still be viewing Overwatch 2, or maybe, viewed this way at all, ever, as like this super hyper DPS focused game, when we are seeing so much, reliance on your tank hero pool and like the tank driving the identity, and if you have Smurf, if you have 2U, if you have someone, you're so much set up for success that kind of, implicitly creates value. Is that kind of MVP defining, let's say? I
think the difference between, like, if we're looking at like the Overwatch League, right? I think the difference is, I would hope, especially based off the success of, like O2 Blast, right? That Overwatch League teams are smart enough to like sign enough, if you're going to sign one tank, he's got to have like a really wide hero pool that he can play effectively, right? And hopefully you're signing 2 so that you can just get coverage everywhere that you need.
Exactly.
To. That's what I would hope for the Overwatch League teams. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to be able to do that. Budgets, whatever, right?
Sure.
But I would hope that it is not so identity driven at the Overwatch
top
level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
At least based off like your one player. Right.
I want to echo that, because Contenders, we discuss setting expectations, setting kind of the focus points is important when we talk about these different leagues, because Contenders has a very different reason for existence than the Overwatch League, right?
Sure.
And that's another reason why O2 Blast is such a interesting study, is because they've done their job as a tier 2 team and also succeeded beyond that, right? So O2, that's why O2 Blast is special. It's not just because they've won, it's they've won with these certain constraints on them. when we talk about identity for teams, it's because they don't have the flexibility required to be able to do everything, right? If you're an Overwatch League team, though, you're the best. Like, you're the tier 1 esport for Overwatch.
Of course,
That concept of identity shouldn't exist. Like, will you have an identity? Yes, because otherwise you don't have a team. But in terms of like meta identity, I think that's you're approaching the question from the wrong side.
Right.
You at the Overwatch League, I think you have a fundamental problem if you're just like, all right, well, our entire identity is based around the fact that our tank player can only play one thing the whole year, no matter what the meta is. I think that's a problem. You run into that problem in Contenders because Contenders is a league where players are supposed to like grow and learn. It's about development. It's about like showing your stuff to like Overwatch League scouts. So like unsigned teams, or even smaller org teams, right? They're gonna have one tank player because either they can't afford to have more tank players, or they just can't afford to be splitting playtime a lot of the time, right? It's much rarer for them to have these multiple tank players and actually successfully rotate them in and out, because nobody wants to be sitting on the bench for a season when you can actually look at this season, right? Arpen and Protect, they split time on Panthera in Summer Series, and now they're on separate rosters as the only tank player for both of those rosters, right? Now, were either of their teams as successful with them being split apart? I would argue no, but I would argue it's still better for each of them as players to get that extra playtime.
For sure. Yeah, I think also if you look at the top level, right? Like it inductively makes a lot of sense for me that you want to have that one guy that can play everything. And I think there has also been some empirical evidence to believe that that is pretty good.
Of course.
But mostly for Seoul. If you look at everyone else that had huge success in the Overwatch League last year, I would say the top 3 teams last year were, of course, Shock, Dallas, and Gladiators. They all have 2 tanks. And they probably all needed them. And I would argue if Gladiators had realized that they needed it sooner, they could have probably won every tournament this year.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So as much as it hurts, and I agree, that's where the premise is different. I think as a player, you want to show off. And this is also, by the way, the little caveat that we always bring up with Atlanta. But I think the general idea of multi-tanks and having the backup there is pretty good. And if the max promotion happens as it looks, then you got to wonder if that's enough. Do you guys think he's like the Smurf type of player that can make it work, or
we don't know.
We haven't. We at the very least haven't seen that, right? Max didn't get the most playtime in O2 Blast. It was mostly Junbin who was in for pretty much the majority of this year, actually.
Okay.
Now when Max subbed in, he destroyed the server, right? But he was mostly playing Sigma. Like the vast majority of what we've seen from Max this year was his Sigma, which absolutely dominated everybody else. Like he was beating guys like 2U and guys like Protect, who are like known in Contenders for their very good Sigmas, and Max was taking them to the cleaners. Right. Yeah. I mean, you can watch, if you go and watch that final, the Circuit Royale match is a brutal tank differential, considering that they like pick Circuit Royale so that they can swap to the Sigma and try to win on a different comp because they've been losing everything else. And then Max gets subbed in and him and Prophet just absolutely destroy everybody.
To put into context though, like it's one thing for me to say, do I expect Max to do well because based on his historical performance, I'd say, like from my feeling perspective, yeah, sure. I don't have evidence though, right? So and making a claim without evidence is kind of not really a good thing to do. And for Max specifically, do I have faith that he's going to perform in the Overwatch League? I do.
Sure.
But I haven't seen it on, characters like, I haven't seen a Winston. I haven't seen any of the...
A lot of these traditional main tanks.
Yeah. Right. And it's tough, right? So, yeah.
But there's also...
Max have the second best Winston in Evolved Contenders?
Exactly.
Possibly. But Junbin's ahead of you in that role. So why would you play?
That would be my question. because okay, here I'm steering the crack pot. Like I'm cooking here.
What does it have to be crack?
Is there a world where Max was just not fielded because he was going to make it anyway? Like the Krusty probably locked that in mid-season, and then you go. I mean, if you locked in, of course, like Shock probably wouldn't love the idea of their tank prospect sitting on the bench and not collecting experience. But like, is there a world where they took Junbin ahead of Max because that guy still wants to get somewhere while Max already is implicitly locked in?
I don't think that's impossible. I would, especially based on like the habits we've seen out of O2 Blast, when it came to when they chose to sub their players in and out, to get them experience, right? Like there were some games where like especially early on in Run It Back, where like Max and Viper and Prophet would just get subbed in for seemingly no reason to play the same comp that was just going on, and they'd still win, right?
Yeah. So it felt like a rep thing.
Okay.
So I think there was a difference. There were occasions where O2 Blast were like, these players are going to be here next, especially for like guys like Viper and Prophet who are still like really young, right? Sure. Were they sitting on the bench most of the time during summer season or during Run It Back? Yes, but there were times where they were like subbed in for experience. So it could be a thing where just, hey, get Junbin more and more experience on these different characters, right? Because we know Max is already good.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's likely, but I can't say it's
possible. Right. That sounds like it's at least like within the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Would the both of you feel a little safer, like if this Max promotion is, going to happen, would it be safer if it was like a double promotion, or they at least had some insurance behind Max?
Well, I think
Junbin's not eligible, so you can't.
Oh, okay, fair.
Junbin's too young, but if you promote Max to Overwatch League and you give him like another tank that can like cover the stuff that Junbin covers, right? I can't see a world where that roster doesn't succeed.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely somebody. I feel like kind of very, very akin to like Smurf last year for a lot of us, right? Like we didn't know if he could necessarily play a lot of those traditional flex tanks. Turns out he can. Very cool. Sure. Awesome. The gamble pays off. It feels like a lot of those same narrative pieces kind of, orbit Max, but in like the inverse.
I think, the hardest thing, it's the same question with like, when you have two tank players and only one can play.
Right.
I mean, it's tough. Is all of the stuff we have about Max is the stuff that we know he's good on. He's great. He's elite. He could challenge for best in the league on those roles. I think when you talk about those historical flex tanks, absolutely. The question though for Max is, as always in Overwatch 2 with tank players, is going to be, do they have that flexibility with them?
Right.
And until I have evidence, I'm not going to say yes or no.
Yeah. I get you.
And it's not just this year either, right? Because like last year when he was still on O2 Blast, he still didn't get as much playtime as Junbin because it was like a wrecking ball meta, and Junbin's an unbelievable wrecking ball, right? So he's sort of just like, I don't want to say that he's been like a mystery, because anytime we do see him, he's playing really well. But we definitely have a smaller sample size on him than like Smurf or
sure.
Right?
Totally.
I will also say I have the best Korean Contenders main tank rookie coming in, PTSD. Because if you think about how the last two seasons went with Mac and Kellen,
sure,
right? Like, do you have any explanation for that pattern? Are they just used differently?
Well, I mean, when it comes to
Kellen has.
That New York roster was a mess.
Listen, if you make Yaki look like a bad player, I think that it's not the player's faults anymore.
I think that was probably
on other rosters. So
yeah, there are some fun rumors behind the scenes how they first communicated through the first couple of scrims, where it's like, wait, is he trolling? Or is he actually like, is Yaki serious? Is that how we play Overwatch? Like, much more passive style on Kellen, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that could just be a mismatch. I also think it's rarely all over for those guys, right?
No.
But it
Like,
is
worst case scenario for those guys, they'll get bounced back to contenders for a season,
And still look
probably do really
fantastic.
well, and then get picked up again.
right. Yeah, and
that's where
even
where my PTSD flares up with
Yes.
Lafon, and I'm like,
Yes,
God,
yes.
bro, like somebody help this kid.
Yeah.
He needs.
Yeah.
I don't know what sports psychologist needs to get a hold of him, but the Contenders performance versus the Owl performance is just like night and day, and you know that this kid has talent.
Well, and a lot of that comes down to structure for these teams.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I find, especially, outside of the one time a full Contenders roster was picked up all as 6, right? A lot of the time players look good because they're in the right environment. And when that environment changes and becomes not the right environment, it doesn't matter how good the player is or the player next to him.
This kid is so annoying. No, they're mid as hell. Mid.
For audio listeners, as Paul is so eloquently defending my position on the Atlanta Reign versus the a potential other team, I'm just very very passive aggressively tilting and smiling. So I'm just gonna leave that there. You assume what you might.
Speaking of,
I feel like I just threw Kindle on a fire that I didn't know was there.
Not at all.
Here, let me run that idea by you. You guys watch the Overwatch League as well, and see. Speaking of crackpot theories, Joe is convinced that at this point, he assumes that the Toronto Defiant with the American Tornado and Xorus, without Aspire, would outperform whatever the Atlanta Reign are cooking up.
And a lot of
I saw it, Lafon. I saw it. Your spirit left your body.
No. Okay, so here's the thing, right? I mean, that is certainly
it's a take. It's a take of all time. It certainly is.
It's. I wouldn't even go as far as letting you defend yourself with a take of all time on that one.
Okay,
Joe, that's tough.
Wait, so run that by me again. So Toronto Defiant pick up all of American Tornado, you said?
In the world that Toronto signs the core of American Tornado, and with what we know of Atlantis thus far, I have more confidence in Toronto with the AT core than I do with Atlanta with like this absolutely crackpot roster.
We're making a lot of assumptions about the coaching ability of both Kasaurus and Gator with no evidence.
Sure. But then again, I am here. I come in with a Depay notion of 95% of the season's roster building, which is he said 85, but I'm saying 95 because it sounds better.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if we're making assumptions about the coaching, I'm just going with the players that have already performed at that high level for that long. So Atlanta Reign for sure. And I say that as someone who's like, Toronto Defiant's probably the team that I want to be the best.
I get where you're coming from, Joe, but that is certainly an outside pitch. It is progressively harder and harder to defend. As Atlanta makes more and more moves, and we have to only assume that when the free agency window opens later this month, that they'll probably make more and more moves. But I really, not to kick a dead horse, and I want to get back to O2 for a moment. But it to me, what really stuck out with what you were saying was environment, and specifically about like my questioning about how Atlanta really cohesively brings that together with players who haven't even lived in the US or played with within a mixed roster. So I don't know if that really is something that I can put my stock into versus a team that has played together with a coach that has had experience on a near championship roster.
Joe is the type of motherfucker that will say friendship will prevail, then has his WoW raid group of friends completely tank every fucking raid encounter. And that has it proven to him that he would rather be playing with the dickheads that at least know how to play their class.
If your friendship is strong enough, you can stand in the fire.
That's true. That's true. That's very true. Now,
as a former raider, I hate you.
Just gotta trust in the homies. Somebody that I've trusted in since Gauntlet has been Bliss, and you talk about a kid that's been 15 perpetually for the last 6 years, what it feels like. I've been waiting for this kid to come in, and I've heard some mixed reviews, at least going into last season, So tell me everything I want to know about Bliss. Is this kid the truth?
I have nothing bad to say about Bliss. My only concern is that O2 were so like much better than everybody else. There wasn't really a moment where there was no chance really for Bliss to just like have a star power move, right? There was no situation this season where like I needed to see Bliss pop off.
Sure.
But there was also no situation this season where I was ever thinking Bliss was doing the wrong thing.
Okay.
Bliss also does not, I shouldn't say does not. Bliss also was not required to showcase the flex support because they had caffeine on the bench, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean with O2 Blast players, in general, this is going to be a recurring. Every single player on O2 Blast this season is going to have this sort of not asterisk, but like you have to kind of say they have substitutes for everyone else, right?
Okay.
Like HeeSang is not going to be playing the Widowmaker because you've got on the bench Prophet. Prophet is going to be your Widowmaker player when required. If we saw HeeSang go to the Sojourn, that wasn't so great, so they had someone else. They switched it around, right? HeeSang became exclusively the flex DPS player. So I think for Bliss, I have faith in Bliss as a Lucio player for sure. And I think it has in the past showcased Brig as well that looked really strong. But if you're running exclusively main support, does the flex support issue come into play? We don't know because Bliss wasn't required to do it.
Sure.
The way you're talking about O2 Blast makes me believe like basically the internal scrims by them getting one more support probably were the best games played in Korea last year, right? Or this.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I guess if that's the case, I think Babel's another player to definitely bring up, somebody that I think is going to ring a lot of bells for, former London Spitfire fans.
Dude.
Maybe a little disappointing, but it sounds like O2, if you want to trust in this development dynasty that they're creating, Babel's pretty good, it sounds like.
Babel's not the same. Oh man, talking about team dynamic, Babel is not the same player that was in London Spitfire. I think now strongly Overwatch League level.
If I'm going to be honest, it like when London picked up Babel, I think me and a lot of other people were scratching their heads, right? Because he was new. He'd only played on BM Hawk, I think, and they weren't a particularly impressive roster, if I remember correctly. I think he was just picked up way before he was ready. Gotcha. Now it's been 2 years, 2.5 years, whatever. He's more than ready.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean that's exciting to hear.
Honestly, it feels like that London team from 2020 has a huge chip on their shoulder, right? Like there's so many of these London players still around. What is it, 4 of that former team? Despite what they saw happen to Glister over various seasons, they're still living that dream. That's crazy.
And to be fair, Glister was a stud then, and still was halfway okay. I think if he wanted to, he probably could come back in the right environment. Again, #environment. Friendship. I don't know.
I don't believe in friendship. I hate underdog stories.
That's true. That's true. As Lafon's co-caster, I can confirm that.
I don't like underdog stories. The better team should win. Underdog stories.
Fair. True.
I'm that person. That person you dislike because their takes is the better team should win all the time. I'm that person.
True.
So, the diagonal here. Yiska and I, we agree on a lot of things.
I'm starting to learn that.
Yeah. But to that point, I mean that London team was picked up 2 years too early. There's a lot of really good players there.
Yeah, super talented.
Yeah, it's tough.
That's crazy that you literally have 16-year-olds that are ready but can't go into the league, and 21-year-olds that are just now ready. It's crazy how it sometimes works. Especially if these guys actually make it back, and I think there's a good chance that some of them will, because
for sure.
He is a little bit of a leak. Of course, a bunch of teams are talking to, these guys. Definitely O2, also Prisa, right? That's just par for the course. Especially, I would expect that this probably goes far down the totem pole this year, depending on what happens with the Chinese teams in terms of if you want to go super min, and if you actually end up playing in another region, or you can do it remotely or whatever it is, there's probably got a lot of Korean contenders players just directly being contacted. So I think there's there's plenty of reason to believe that you still can be picked up in Contenders Korea, especially after such a renaissance of rookie-ship in Season 5. Because if you looked at the efficacy of rookies, it hasn't been this good in a hot minute, if ever, because you probably shouldn't count Season 1. But like what rookies were able to do this year, presumably because it's a new game, therefore a new filtering process, and like old habits and old build-up skills no longer count for much. Like, I think...
And you also have to consider, right, like a lot of these, rookies, it's not even necessarily people who have like picked up the game in the last year, right?
Yeah.
It's people who were 13 when Overwatch came out and have just been nonstop playing it, even through like content drought or whatever, right? And they're just they were the ones who've been grinding for 6 years, and now, hey, they're finally 18. Cool, they're cracked.
Yeah.
Just I guess a quick rundown in team. Like, there's a couple of outside chance players or like players that I think have a possibility of growth moving forward. They're not going to wow you right now, but they're serviceable with an opportunity to kind of step in. I think players like Jasmine is one of them.
I was going to say Jasmine, yeah.
Yeah, that's the tank player for oh my god,
SLT.
Starlight. Sungnam Starlight. Jasmine was good. Relative to I think the middle of the pack teams.
Jasmine, for how new a player Jasmine was, Jasmine had like some really cool moments of brilliance, right? Just not as like consistent or well-rounded as obviously guys like Junbin.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean do I think Jasmine's going to come in and wow the league? No, I do not. And it's this is a player that I think has an opportunity to like grow into a serviceable Overwatch League player. There's a couple of players like that. I think this season for Contenders Korea, I know we're talking about O2 Blast and Prisa and so forth, but in general, I think this is the platoon season for Contenders Korea. This is the season where coming out of it, there's a lot of players that have the ability to grow and showcase themselves as very respectable Overwatch League players, but outside like maybe 3 or 4 are not going to be best in the league at their role.
Or at least, at the very least, shouldn't be expected to be like
right.
world
Yes,
class.
yeah.
Okay.
Expectations are kind of what I'm talking about here,
Gotcha.
right? Because
Copy. I guess in that same vein, an award that we like to give out at near the start of every season is like the skewed award, like going back and looking at how poor of a team skewed was on, and then he turns out to be like this really talented player. If either of you had to give a skewed award for the best player on like the worst team, like somebody who,
yeah. I mean, you have to say Donghack, right?
I mean, the problem with 815 is that they're players that. So for those unfamiliar, they're the former Talon roster.
They are and they aren't at this point, right?
Yeah.
There's only 2 Talon players on that team still.
Okay.
But that team should not have gone.
No,
that is not a team that should be
0-7, 4 maps won.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. They were challenging to take maps off teams.
Yeah.
Right? So like,
and they weren't the maps they won weren't necessarily even because they like played really well.
Gotcha.
Like that Panthera game was scrappy, to put it gently. Certainly a mess of a game. And it's crazy to think of Donghack on a team that didn't pick up a series win when this time last year it was like Donghack and Junbin, the best players who can't go to the Overwatch League, right?
Okay.
But I think Donghack is still really good. I do have questions about his hero pool at this point because he tried to play the Winston this season, like with the Winston like rush. It did not look very good, honestly. His Junker Queen looked great when we were in Junker Queen meta. His Wrecking Ball is obviously phenomenal. His Wrecking Ball is so good that he was playing Wrecking Ball toward the end of the season instead of Winston in that same composition, just because he was so much better at Wrecking Ball, right? I have to wonder what would happen on if you put Donghack in a team with more resources.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of like like a full-on skewed player though, right? A player that comes from like one of the worst teams.
Yeah, and is like genuinely a gem.
Yeah, I mean, Contenders Korea, it's tough to kind of. I don't think Contenders Korea has a player that would fit like.
I mean,
skewed
you
moniker.
really only get to look at 2 teams this season to even try to find that, right? Because there were just 2 teams that were like head and shoulders below everybody else, right?
What is it? Ankles and toes below everyone? I guess?
Yeah, exactly, right. And even then, it's hard for
Actually, you know what? I mean, look, man, it's tough. Diamond, I guess you could say like half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because which would be kind of funny considering the skewed thing. Half plays the same role. But half's also been on teams that were good.
I mean, Diamond was good in B-sides, right? Like they were 3rd place in B-sides, and then they just fell apart. I have no idea what happened with Diamond. It looked like they had their comms turned off this whole season, man. It was rough.
I would say also within the award, there's something implied where you can't see it happening. Actually, it probably should also just be the Lip Award, because I remember wasn't that hard on Blossom, right? And then as the Overwatch League preseason scrims started happening, people were telling me, if this kid isn't cheating, he's like the best hit scan the world has ever seen. And then he was the best hit scan the world has ever seen. So,
there you go.
Yeah,
I think there's also players in Contenders that just by nature of the setup are worse in Contenders than they are in Overwatch League.
Right.
I mean, I'll say it here. I think Proper performed better in the Overwatch League than he ever did in Contenders in his debut season. I think in terms of like
interesting. Okay.
That's all to say. Though the only difference is Proper was amazing in Contenders too. So
yeah, he went from A+ to S+, right?
I might have an Anta quote that was shared where Anta said, if I look at scrim footage of Proper, he looks like he gets bored of the Tracer duel midway through and then still wins it, you know? And I feel like that could actually legitimately be the case if you just win it all the time. I mean, he describes it now as like, you know, the happiest time. Also because he didn't win.
Oh, God. And Tracer's so much better now, too. Oh, man.
Yeah.
True.
I like, just a quick aside, the stream where Proper was talking about like how to aim on Tracer. He's like, just go where they aren't and shoot where they're going to be. And it's like, no one can do that. Like that's just you.
Yeah.
Just see through the infinite possibilities and kill them.
Go where they aren't. Spoken like a true RTS nerd. I mean, is there anybody else out there that you guys feel like needs to shine a light on? I've heard good things from Simple, from like the UA crowd.
Yeah. I mean, Simple is really good. I think if Simple was on one of the top teams, we would definitely be talking about him as like the best Kiriko.
Okay.
I think, there's also players like Alien who is good. Alien is also in that weird boat though, where like June, like end of June, I think is his birthday, something like that. A Peach was good.
A Peach was really good. Yeah.
Unique was fine, right?
I think fine. You're tripping. Well, Unique was my favorite Lucio to watch, man.
Yeah, you
Dude,
and I.
Fine. What are you talking about?
Agree so much on this one, I guess. No,
okay.
Fine.
This man's just deleted B-sides from his mind. I have to Unique literally saved T1 like 6 times.
I forgot. I have to translate myself for like the audience. Fine for me means really good. He's not an S player. Like he's not an S tier player. Fine. Okay. I'm talking like an A+ kind of situation. I'm sorry. I forgot that Paul's used to me and y'all aren't. Yeah, no, unique is fine.
Yeah, like possibly the what top 2 Lucio in the region. Like, come on.
That's crazy.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah,
I mean, another player that's kind of jumped around a little bit. I've heard Arpen quite a good deal. Is there anything there that you guys like or dislike?
I don't know, man.
The tank line for T1, I'm tough to actually put any real qualifiers on because they're forced to play a single composition, right? With the fact that they made themselves go with Kleston as a DPS player. And again, no shade to Kleston. I think Kleston on tank was really good. On Reaper and Tracer was not it.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
T1 is just really hard to read this
Mm.
season at all. Because they're a runner-up from B-sides, right? And then they lose one player, move their tank to DPS, and then pick up what was like another really good tank. But T1 took forever to wake up this season, right? I wasn't impressed with a T1 game that we had until literally the very last time we saw them in the third place match, and they beat Pantera, right? Like finally, I was like, oh my god, this is like, I think we actually said it on cast. This is the T1 we've been waiting to see all season. And it's just hard for me to qualify. Okay, was that just they had a really good match day, or when we go like to Pacific Showdown, are they actually going to start like really competing? I think Arpen has definitely. I think he looked better on Panthera, honestly, just like as an individual player, in my opinion. But it's hard for me to quantify if that's just like T1 was a little bit of a mess at the start of this season, or if that was Arpen was just in, he had less to do on Panthera because he wasn't the only tank.
Yeah. I think there's also a couple players that are like outside chances. If you look at Panthera, they have a couple of players that I think have a possibility. Hidden, was good. Actually, no, that's a disservice to Hidden. Hidden was good. In a lot of terms. I think also
he's not proud, but like he was a good player.
Yes, I think also we didn't mention Probe, who turns 18 fairly early in the season, like
Probe and HeeSang should both be getting picked up.
Yeah, pretty easily.
I know they're both early March. Actually, fun fact, they're born within 3 days of each other.
Today, I learned.
Talk about DPS synergy.
Matching astrology signs. Let's go. So, if there's not any more like outside chances, I wanted to hit you guys with like a little lightning round of like best ofs.
Yes.
Let's do the best ofs to run it back. Okay.
I love these.
Just the first name that comes to mind that you think is the best.
Wait.
Well, I mean, that one I feel like is a given. So we're not, it's very improper to head that direction. So
proper?
Exactly. I'm glad somebody picked it up. We started with hit scan, so let's start there. Best hit scan this season.
I don't know if you're going to agree with me, Lafon. I'm going to say Proud.
I know it's supposed to be a lightning round.
Hey, you what you gotta do.
I was really thinking, man.
More comparisons to Yiska, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Jeez. I was being sarcastic with it. I love these. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Proud.
I think the other person you put in the conversation is Probe. But
I think Proud's better.
Proud at least looked flashier because he had so much more to do on that team.
All right. Best Lucio.
My heart says Unique, but my brain says Bliss.
Yeah, this one's Bliss.
Okay. Best Tracer.
HeeSang.
Oh yeah, HeeSang without a doubt.
And Yiska, if you have any that you feel like you should jump in with, definitely go for it.
Most likely to be called Rookie of the Year next year.
Ooh.
I'm gonna say voters hate giving this award to DPS players, so we'll say Max. I'm playing the meta on this one a little bit.
Yeah,
sure.
Most likely to be Rookie of the Year. Oh, man, it's such a boring answer. I guess I'll go with HeeSang.
Sure. I guess it like the question is like 6 layers deep because it kind of requires you to also extrapolate. Okay, where are they likely to go? Is it possible?
Right?
Well, and the problem with saying HeeSang, which is why I hesitated so much, is because like last year, HeeSang was flashier than he was this year, right? HeeSang really became a very well-rounded DPS player this year, and I don't know if that is just like. I mean, I don't know if that's just because like he wanted to like become more well-rounded, or if like
Speaking of out there
he's
theories,
pivoted
though.
his style to where he won't be like the star DPS on a
Sure.
roster.
Yeah,
Right.
so I was gonna say, speaking of out there theories, to add to what Paul's just saying, maybe he knows who his DPS duo is gonna be.
Yeah.
In Overwatch,
Yeah.
so it's like,
Yeah.
And he's ready to play a role filler.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Dude,
a
he's getting
motherfucker
signed
that
to
saw
Atlanta.
what
He'll be
happened to
alongside
Kilo.
Lip.
Yeesh. Him and Stalker.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, geez.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's even harder of a devil's advocate to play. Come on, folks.
Okay.
Sigma sounds like
Here-
it's pretty obvious. Go ahead.
It's a mean one. The biggest name that's most likely to be upsettingly bad. They call it the Mag Award. Yes.
Yeah.
Someone that comes in with hype but doesn't deliver.
You know what? I'm also gonna play the meta on this one too. HeeSang for this one.
I mean, that's kind of what I was. That's where my brain went.
Because I think a lot of people are going to see him coming from O2 Blast, the role that Proper used to play,
Right.
and are going to give him that title when he doesn't deserve it. So I don't.
Yeah.
I think no matter what HeeSang does, he gets this award anyway. Entirely irrelevant of his performance.
Sure.
Sure.
No. I mean, again, a lot of the same narrative points coming in from Proper kind of feel very reminiscent to a lot of how people are talking about HeeSang. So if those expectations aren't necessarily met, especially
Setting
for
those expectations now, do
Yes.
not do that.
Yeah, please, when we go into the season, if I see anybody being like the second coming of Proper,
it's happening.
I'm gonna have to wring someone's neck, man.
Might be the title of this episode. Who knows?
I've jinxed it. Sorry, HeeSang.
No, I can't do him that dirty. Can't do
how-
him that bad? But
How strong is generally speaking the rookie class coming in that can be promoted? Let's say if you had to say out of the last 3 promotional periods, where does this rank?
Not as strong as this year's
Mm-hmm.
overall. I mean, there were just so many good rookies this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like as in from last season, right?
As from
Yeah.
like the 2022 season.
yeah, the 2022 graduating class coming into the Overwatch League.
Yeah.
I'd say it's like. I mean, it's not first. Out of the last 3, I mean, I might put it.
I might put
Third.
Yeah, second
Yeah.
or third. It's definitely
Yeah.
not. It's definitely not the weakest. Not even close.
And it
trying
sounds
to-
like it's difficult to be the strongest with some of these names that have come.
Yeah,
I'm trying
it's
to
not
remember who
impossible.
all was a rookie in 2021.
Pelican.
No, I think it's third.
Okay.
I think HeeSang and Max would have to have a level of play so high to even be second that it's not reasonable to expect.
It probably won't have the breadth of.
And will not
Right?
have have the number of players coming through. Yeah.
And I think a lot of there won't be as many, and that's kind of the thing, right? I think a lot of the players you're gonna pick up too, are guys that technically won't be rookies. Like I expect Tuyu
Right,
to get
yeah.
picked
Right.
up. I expect
True.
guys like Sanguinar to get picked up, right? Even there's an outside chance you could pick up somebody like Neist too, right?
Mhm.
Sure.
A lot of these guys aren't technically rookies. They were just
I mean,
on
Tuyu
teams
is
that,
not a rookie.
Right.
exactly,
For Soul.
right? They were just on, they just didn't get picked up for whatever reason this year,
Mm.
and now have gotten better.
Is there like a player that has shown like character that you think people will fall in love with?
Top Dragon,
No,
I think, is
I was gonna say
quietly
Top
one of-
Dragon, yeah.
Top
he's
Dragon's
fun.
quietly
that.
one of the. He's a funny guy.
Oh,
I don't know if he'll
no.
come across if he gets picked up, but I think if he's allowed to showcase himself, he'll be someone that people really enjoy watching.
Yiska, are we gonna have to buy you a Top Dragon jersey for the memes?
You already know what's coming, right?
Again, for those who don't know, and you need to be in Discord to know, I'm not going to go into visceral detail, but I'm going to say like a month straight, this kid was just Top Dragon pilled, let's say. Everything was Omega Lul, Top Dragon, Top this, Dragon that. It's dragging my nuts on your head. Anything you can think of, and then some. Yiska was
Mate,
just
you-
having a ball.
You forgot the best one. and TopDragon completely whiffs the bray. It called that sloppy toppy.
Oh no, I strategically didn't say that, but I'm glad you did.
Amazing.
Yeah, sloppy toppy dragon was.
Lafon, I've got so much good content for our next cast now.
It got a little out of hand, but yeah, it's comical to hear that TopDragon is like the personality favorite coming out of this graduating class because of Yiska's affinity for his name. But yeah, anything else? I mean, looking ahead, I know that Pacific Showdown is coming up. Is there anything there that you guys think is interesting? Are there any like fun matchups outside of O2 just like running amok?
I mean, the biggest narrative point is does O2 Blast even drop a map?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a legitimate question. Right.
And then, I mean, looking at the other regions that are challenging, I think to step away from Korea for a second, this is the first time we've had a cross-regional showcase in a long time.
2 years.
Yeah. I mean, the last time was Team CC, right? Taking the victory over that. So, I'm just interested to see how the other regions have changed since we last saw them.
Careful wording.
Showcase themselves. I think if you have any expectations for Prisa and O2 to not win, I mean, good luck. But it'll be nice to see at least if there's a chance for other regions to play up to the level of these two teams.
Well, with what you guys have said about T1, maybe not necessarily showing up until towards the end of the season, and with information necessarily not being announced just yet as to what happens regarding, what kind of patch we're playing on for Pacific. Like, is there a world where maybe Korea doesn't steal all 3 top spots and maybe T1 kind of slumps to maybe a top Chinese team or maybe an upset here or there?
I mean,
it's our world.
For HLX, so for HLXC was I think the best team overall in Contenders China. They didn't win their finals for what I would describe as reasons that are entirely avoidable. They didn't look like the team
in their final.
Yeah.
Okay.
If HLXC can get themselves back in a place where they're playing to the strengths of their squad, there is a chance where HLXC can take that spot away.
I agree with that.
But like that's an outside chance considering how they played in their finals.
I also think it's difficult going into a tournament like this to pred against O2 Blast because again, they're just the most they're the most org, right?
Sure, yeah.
For lack of a better way to put it, like they have the resources, they'll have like tons of time to do prep. They'll have like the crazy backroom staff keeping their heads in the cool, right? Nobody else even really I mean, HLXC don't even have a coach, right? They have 2 managers. I actually don't think there's a single coach on any of the tabbing through, at least based on what's on Wikipedia. There isn't a coach on any of the top 3 Contenders China teams, right? They have managers, but no actual coaches to help them in the back room. It's hard for me to imagine, even if HLXC managed to get back to form in the 2 weeks we have off, which I think is a very real possibility, mind you. That O2 Blast won't beat them. Now, could they give us one absolutely banger matchup? I think that's certainly a possibility. There's a lot of great players on that team. I've always been a huge fan of Liga. Liga is one of the most robbed players in Overwatch League for me in terms of what happened to the guy. But it's hard for me to vote against O2 Blast.
Makes sense. I mean, they are the perennial overdog, right? They are the favorite. They are the front runners. It's not close. They drop a map in the strongest region. You have to assume, barring any kind of weird patch, mamma jamma, that they come in and absolutely throttle a lot of these teams. I have to assume. Right?
Drop one night off in order to make it, interesting.
Drop the first map of the grand final just to give everybody's hopes up, and then totally steamroll 4 more.
I have to also maybe assume if there is or has been, movement made on the O2 front, is there a world where we see a very shocking absence where it's just that player's markedly not here. I wonder where they could be.
If history is any indicator, the last time we had an international showcase like this, teams were allowed to keep their players for the tournament before they went to, because I think Team
I remember
CC,
that was the thing with Team CC. Yeah.
Right.
Like
They
Dia had already been picked up at that point, I think. Or not Dia. It wasn't
Their
Dia.
tanks. Their tanks.
then.
Their
Yeah, it
Gaga
was their
and-
tanks. That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they had already been picked up, but they were still allowed to play.
Actually, it was their tanks and support. It was Gaga and Super Rich, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think that should generally, it's also sort of in the interest of the teams that have locked up these players. Now keep in mind, depending on how long we keep delaying this window, maybe they aren't the players yet, so there's no problem there as well. But yeah, I think generally speaking, also I like the timing actually, because theoretically, depending on when it happens with the window, like prior to the current window, you're kind of, suggesting yourself to some of those teams.
For sure.
Of course, there are a ton of handshake agreements in place, but not everyone is fully built. Like there will be some impressions. It almost feels like, how we had the World Cup do this for a while.
Sure.
Now this feels
There's
like
some names
this
there
is-
that I'm like, oof.
Yes, it could be good and bad. I agree, Joe. Like you can absolutely also dupe people based on one lucky performance.
What did that Diva player do at that World Cup? He threw some fucking hot shit bombs. I want him on my team. Let's sign him. Eesh.
I mean, that one
Not gonna
worked
throw
out,
shade, but
right? Are you talking about Mickey?
well, I'll name. No.
Right. No, true.
That one.
Diva wasn't even out
yes.
when that happened. Yeah.
That one kind of still fits, but I think that was more of a hit more than a few misses that I feel like history has presented us. But
Sure.
I think that, like what Yiska's saying, like this kind of feels like a combine in a way, right? Like this is your last chance. Like it's right before the deadline. God forbid we, delay again for the free agency window. Like this is like your last opportunity to like get it out there and prove to these teams that are still looking for people that like you should be on their short list.
I mean,
really
I will
exciting.
say on that point, actually, it's a bigger deal for the Chinese teams,
Right.
than it is for the Korean teams.
Sure.
Yeah. I'll give you one for free. I think the further delay is quite likely, right? Because like it is just that tough of a fix to make, right? To
Sure.
So I actually think now that I think about it, you just would have to have communicated that in advance. But I kind of like the timing in terms of like, I think there should be a long window after the season that like coaches can calm down, and it also will probably improve the quality of the scouting.
Sure.
But I also want this, these contenders tournaments sit in like prior to the window opening. So, everything is out there before the transfer market opens.
Yep.
Viewers can get excited for these rookies and go like, oh yeah, just saw him. Now he's getting signed like a week later or whatever it could be.
Yep.
I think this is actually something that they could look at making a thing generally. And I think a lot of teams would also like that.
For sure.
Would
I
agree.
think it also ties in tier 2 to tier 1 a little bit more cohesively than
Right.
it
Oh, yeah.
does right now. Tier 2 exists as sort of a byproduct of tier 1 as opposed to a part of the ecosystem, at least to my eyes, looking through.
And it kind of mimics the the esports space as well. Like it seems like most other like high class, really impactful. It's not the word I'm looking for, but it serves its purpose for right now. Like they have like these off-season tournaments that like people that are a little bit more dedicated, that are interested in like the graduating class, that maybe want to see a first look, like a teaser of like what the season could look like for some of these teams. There's always like I'm remembering. I think Korea has one for League of Legends.
Yeah.
And there's still some like Academy League stuff going on in North America for League of Legends. Like there is always like, and I think there was stuff for StarCraft, but don't get me on that hill. But like there's always like these off-season like fun like extra credit assignments that you can go into like with a lot of joy and finding these little gems to kind of hold on to and get ahead of the pack. And like it is really exciting and it's really fun. I think Lafon, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Instead of it being like this rushed byproduct, like it kind of can shine for a little bit as like this scouting, this period of scouting, this really kind of like dramatic build up into the season start. And if the season has to be a little bit shorter to kind of facilitate that, I don't think anybody's going to be, well, I guess if everybody has annualized salaries, maybe that's not necessarily in the best case of the players, but yeah, hard to say. It's not an easy fix, but I think I would agree with Yiska. It is a little serendipitous. It's like,
and it's actually more attractive too for Overwatch League teams to make academy teams in theory, right?
Sure.
Like if things like Pacific Showdown are used to like fill like the gaps in the Overwatch League time. And they're like these big interregional events. There's more eyes on your academy team. I mean, again, got to use them as a baseline. They're the most successful academy team ever. Yeah. You look at O2 Blast. They're at a point where O2 have so much success that they're like giving away like branded merch at the studio, right? Yeah. Like they'll have like giveaways for like mouse pads and jackets and stuff, right? Like I feel like it's pretty rare that you see a
contender team able to do that,
tier 2 team that successfully can like brand its own merch, right?
True.
But if there are enough eyes, if you do it at the right time and you make it a spectacle of it, it makes it more attractive for Overwatch League teams to invest in tier 2.
True. Yeah. Hashtag support tier 2.
Yeah,
agreed there.
I think
the last point before we skedaddle.
Sure. I think also a lot of teams, rightfully, a lot of general managers are just envious of this pipeline that the Shock have built there, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's not even at super premium that they have this, right? Like I can tell you, Proper was not even close to being the highest paid player last year. And you could argue, of course, he shouldn't be. It's his rookie year. What if he flops? Blah, 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 right? But I don't think he's going to be paid more than a couple of players, at least, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're usually getting talent in because they buy into the system there, and they have a talent pipeline. And the way this is set up, also, like, with the deal where presumably Shock, at least in a promotional sense, I'd actually never researched this, but I would expect that they also helped with the merch in some way. Finagled a deal there that isn't primarily, money just like going over the table, but implicitly bringing value to that team. I think that's just something, such an innovative solution and such a fruitful one for potentially years to come, right? That this is definitely the way other teams should be looking forward to. It's not just that you got to pump like endless amounts of money in. You can find interesting and creative solutions in order to, facilitate a talent pipeline.
Agreed there. I think much in that same way, and I remember saying this very, very lucidly, looking at talent pipelines, how much it does lead to success. Even going back to like my soapbox, like talking about like Rascal, like people don't remember Shock got Rascal because they got him from Contenders. And I think they signed him early. They kind of skipped the signing window, got him on NRG, which was their Contenders team at the time, and then just promoted him afterwards. Like there are like really, it's not tangible value, but it does like correlate to a lot of tangible value when you look at like how much talent pipelines have led to success. You look at London. Yes. Oh, yeah. Was their first season a little bit, shaky, a little bit goofy, a little bit silly pilled? 100%. I don't think you have this the resounding success of the 2022 season if you don't have the 2021 season and all of their contender success, right?
Sure.
I think the teams that are kind of a little bit, or they have this foresight about them to build and have these connections. I think they are reaping the benefits, and it's no surprise to me that Shock is one of those teams that London has had as much success with as little resources as they've been able to kind of acquire. And I would not be surprised as I think the health of the game kind of gradually increases. Shout out to Butterfinger. We love a Butterfinger, but please God, Butterfinger, come back. that we see more teams invest in tier 2, and we see more at least connections. Maybe not necessarily hard dedicated academy teams, but these connections and these pipelines and these systems form to kind of bridge that gap and bring a lot of success to these teams. So fingers crossed. But I think that's going to be it from us today for episode 273. I want to give at least this final little bit to Paul and Lafon to give us their goings-ons. What's going on with you guys? Where can people find you? Paul, let's start with you.
Oh, well, so you can find me at the nice Twitter link that is posted right here, right there. Man, I have a busy December. I can't talk about much of it, but
hey, it sounds like a good busy. Hopefully.
It is a good bit. Well, there's real life bad busy that's
okay, fair.
Moving, but there's a lot of good busy in the casting realm as well.
Busy's good.
You'll be seeing a lot of me in December, and if you want to see more of me, then that one.
Agreed. Check out the Twitter. Also good people. Lafon as well. Also very good people.
Yeah, it's debatable.
Shout out to the D&D. Anybody who checks out the Star Wars, I don't know. We'll have to, cult classic, let's say. Lafon, what's up with you?
I mean, at Paulsible, by the way, because he forgot to say it out loud.
Oh yeah, this is a podcast.
They say I'm
this
not.
This is why I work with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me at LafonH on Twitter. Pretty empty schedule for December, so we'll see what happens.
All right. Any projects going on? Any new coffee reviews? I do need to.
Oh, coffee reviews.
Look, if you let him go off on that, this is going to turn into a 3-hour podcast.
Listen, if you want to know about coffee, at LafonH on Twitter, we can have a conversation. Just time there.
Listen, there's somebody in the community that loves beer Twitter, and all I'm saying is Lafon's got coffee Twitter unlocked. I think an underrated member of the coffee Twitter community, some of the best. That's all I'm saying.
Someone wants to know what my next hair color is going to be. Our producer wants to know what my next hair color is going to be.
Oh, okay.
I don't know yet. So we'll when I find out, you'll be the first to
my Twitter.
My stylist will be the first to know, but you'll be the second, I suppose, Twitter. So there you go.
Yiska, anything going on with you? I know that you've been really dying to get some work. You've been real slow.
Yeah,
things have been really lazy.
I mean, there's a bunch in the pipe. Of course, I'm not sure when some of it will come out. I'm definitely looking forward to getting some more of those interviews. As I already alluded to in the prior episode, like I have a couple of GMs around that are just waiting for this window to open and their contracts to be signed in order for them then to talk about their experience with this. Because the problem is if you get general managers in a call that are still technically competing against each other in the market, you don't want to give away your hands.
It'd be a little weird.
So we're waiting for that to open so we can do that podcast. I'll probably maybe mix in the player here and there before Christmas. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, next week I'm not going to be around because I'm flying to our Christmas party for GG Recon, and they're, of course, in Manchester. So that'll be happening. You'll miss me. You will see me again the week after, just before Christmas, and then we'll see.
It's true. We may have some plans for Christmas, but in terms of what's happening next week on the show, if you liked Contenders, which if you watch this episode and you got this far, credit to you, but you probably still like Contenders. Ideally, we're going to be doing our China episode next week. It'll be me and some unannounced guests that I don't even know. I have one confirmed person, so we will have to wait and see on what that looks like. But China's next week. We will get to NA and EU, but we want to get the the China and Korea out of the way because of Pacific Showdown coming in. And yeah, that's 273. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Ring the bell. Let's be honest. And see you next week for 274. See you then.
Peace.